Thank you for doing this interview with India Global Business. We are absolutely delighted to have this discussion on all things India and Denmark. I thought we could start out with the Green Strategic Partnership. It's obviously at the forefront of everyone's minds whenever there's any discussion around India and Denmark. Could you tell us, please, how this partnership is going to be rolled out on the ground on a practical basis?
Yes, thank you very much. And I'm also truly honored to be invited for this interaction. I think it's important to tell a little bit about this Green Strategic Partnership, which the Indian Prime Minister Modi ji has called a new age partnership. And we have really spent a lot of time and resources on coming to that conclusion that Denmark and India and Denmark should agree upon such a novum. It's the only of its sort in the world, a green strategic partnership. The reason why we went into this was, of course, given what Modi has put rightly in the following mantra. India has the scale, everything out here has a scale that is second to none in the world. He also has said that Denmark has the skills. We have the solutions to really cooperate with India in a number of fields. And secondly, when the two prime ministers had their virtual summit on the 28th of September, scope, huge challenges out here, and also the speed. There's a need of the hour really to tackle a lot of the issues. Denmark has been known and is still known for a very cutting edge kind of green transformation. We are really on the forefront, and our companies, our private households, the whole society has become one of the most sustainable ones. So when India and Denmark started reaching out to each other, said, okay, where can we really work together? We know that we have a lot of traditional strategic partnerships, and they will also cover some of these areas. To have one which is only specifically addressing the climate, the green transformation and such, that's really unique. And of course, India stands in front of huge challenges, how really to cope with the climate changes, how to cope with the right energy mix, how to cope with the water scarcity and so forth. So there are a lot of issues where Danish companies, Danish authorities can work with India and cooperate with India to secure that India will be able to really to manage this green transition. And Prime Minister Modi is very much in the forefront of that. What is important here is that we have to move away just from nice statements, nice words, nice political declarations, and into concrete actions. And that's why we have decided on both sides to have very tough deadlines in order to come up with priorities, the focus, and what to do, and who will do X, Y, Z. And on our side, the Danish side, we are looking into a number of tracks: energy, water, finance, and we also need to bring in financial mechanisms that can secure these different projects will also be viable, and that it will meet the criteria of affordability and so forth in India. And then, of course, we have another, perhaps the last track, which is about climate change. So this is more a political one. But this Green Strategic Partnership, we will work on an action plan on both sides in order to outline the priorities, the deadlines, the KPIs, so we know what we are doing, when we are doing, whom is going to take action on X, Y, Z. And I think that's really important. That we are delivering, and we are not just celebrating that we have landed the first Green Strategic Partnership. So that's more or less the overall let's say explanation about this Green Strategic Partnership and how we really put it into action.
You mentioned quite correctly that Denmark is one of the world leaders right now in terms of green energy, green technology. And we obviously know that India has been doing a great deal in trying to sort of push its renewable energy targets, trying to meet its SDG targets. So how do you see these synergies coming together, Ambassador? How do you think they'll work on the ground?
But it has to come together. That's the whole logic behind this Green Strategic Partnership. from a very overall point of view, whatever the world would like to do, the world community would like to do in the battle against climate changes, how to execute on the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs, they should be implemented by 2030. It's not that that far away. How do we do that? And then our conclusion is very clear. Nothing can happen, nothing can be delivered without India being part of that. And India has to be part of the equation. And that's why it's so important that we enter into this kind of cooperation. It goes without saying that India has a lot of challenges. I mean, the scope, so important, the scale. But the way in which we will address these issues through this cooperation will be based on the following. Whatever happens in India, whatever solution will come to India, if you scale it up, it will have a huge impact. Just as a kind of simple example, if you take a smartphone, even the most simple one, and give it to an Indian family, the impact for that family, for the society, is higher than if I get a new smartphone in Denmark, because that will really empower a whole family out here, and they will have a lot of new opportunities. The same if you build or construct a new metro line. In Copenhagen, it will have an impact, of course, and we can measure that. But in India or in Delhi, Hyderabad, wherever these metro lines are coming up, the impact that people can commute and save time instead of using bicycles or two-wheelers or getting into congestions, very, very, very important. So whatever we bring to the table out here in India's very ambitious efforts to meet these global targets will have a huge impact. But we need the scale, we need the scope, and we need the speed of India. And one thing which is very, very important is that India has developed not only a very, very ambitious agenda, but you also have already developed very important tools like Digital India. You have digital technologies in place. You have a cutting edge kind of digitization in place here. So that will be a kind of accelerator for many of these things that we are doing. And India will be able to jump many, many steps by utilizing this asset and other assets out here. So it will make a lot of sense. And I don't see any other country where we can do the same with the same impact, not only in India, but also for the region and also for the whole planet, Mother Earth.
Talking a little bit further about innovation and research, like you talked about, you talked about impact, and certainly the way you can measure impact is through innovation. Thought we could talk a little bit about another aspect of innovation, that's IP. Now, India and Denmark have also signed an MOU in IP recently. So could you please share your thoughts on how Denmark can help India develop its IP reforms to encourage risk-taking and long-term R&D investors? Because this is something that has kind of flown a little bit under the radar in India.
Yeah. That's so true. Point of departure for me will be that India's dependence on foreign relations economically and trade-wise, or if we stick to that, has increased dramatically over the years. When I was out here first time, 10 to 15 as ambassador, it was far less. Today it's close to 50%. So it goes without saying that India is increasingly becoming a part of the global economic trade systems and so forth. And Indian skills, IT skills, and innovation skills, the startup ecosystem that you have in place here in India, that will at some point of time necessitate that India has what I would call the necessary infrastructural parts in place, components in place. And IPR, intellectual property rights, are so important. And of course, we know that India has huge, huge challenges. So there are specific challenges when it comes to health, drugs, and so forth. But in the longer run, you will also see India becoming increasingly a global player with drugs, with medical devices, and so forth. So there will be a natural, even logical kind of incentive on the Indian part also to secure that the IP system here in India is working in a digital way. And that's what we are trying to do. And I have seen how the Indian Patent Office has moved away from a paper world, towards more digital approaches. And that is subscribing to the whole digital agenda. And it's just another kind of must in order to really to be self-reliant, but also to be a global economic partner. And there's an Indian way, but the Indian way will still necessitate that you have all the infrastructural parts in place, and that's IPR as well. So it's not to say just that India and poor Indians will have to pay a price because we would like to protect our innovations and so forth. This is also about securing that India, a self-reliant India, getting more and more into the global value chains, that they can also protect whatever they have invested in new devices, new systems, and so forth. So I think it's a logical part, and it's something that is needed for the future.
Just speaking a little bit on that and broadening up your point about India's growing trajectory into the world order, global order, and becoming a global power. The Indian Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal has been pushing for an India-EU FTA, and has been, quite keen to get that off the rails. And I was wondering if you could just share a little bit about, do you actually see Denmark playing a role in this and helping make this a possibility?
Yeah. Denmark and Danes, we are free traders by heart. We have always been strong supporters of free trade, free, fair trade. And it's so important. And we are very supportive of an EU free trade agreement. We call it the broad-based free and investment agreement. That's so important, and we are very supportive of that. We think it's a must, and the sooner the better. And of course, it should be ambitious, but should we really, as a personal question, should we really build the new town before we are moving into one of the houses? That's a question, that's a political question. What I have realized out here, also listening and interacting with Piyush Goyal, is that India is very, very keen. The last EU-India summit was a very successful and produced joint statement. And we also saw that there was an agreement to initiate a high-level talks and so forth. And may that be the initial start of the journey towards a free trade and investment agreement. I think it's good for India, it's good for the rest of the world, it's good for Denmark, and good for you and me. Free trade is generating opportunities, and it adds value on both sides. I spent myself for some years in Japan, been very much engaged in the EU-Japan free trade agreement. I still recall years back when I was also part of the first group of people starting and looking into that. And people were very much against that. That's not going to work and would never accept it. But last in 2019, 1st of February, the free trade agreement went into force. And it has turned out to be a great success. So free trade is not about imbalances. It's about creating better opportunities and shared opportunities for all of us. And hopefully Piyush Goyal will also be ready to look for balances because there's always a balance. And it's not just about launching the negotiation, but also to get results that are ambitious and will secure that we have a free trade. So we are all for it, and we hope that the Indian government is also for it. And I think this will really be beneficial to India, and it will also secure that the Indian industry, the Indian farmers, the Indian services providers, they will become stronger, more globalized, and they will be part of what has been called the new kind of global supply chains. But it calls for a really, really strong commitment on both sides.
You said something about global supply chains, Ambassador, and I was rather keen on touching upon that. Now, when the two prime ministers spoke during the virtual summit, Prime Minister Modi invited Denmark to join the initiative that India started with Australia and Japan towards diversifying supply chains, given the changing geopolitical situation at the moment. How do you see that working out? Do you see Denmark joining that initiative at all at some point?
I think our point of departure is being a trading nation, being one of the big shipping nations and so forth. We are always in favor of systems, arrangements that will create better and more transparent conditions for our trade and the way in which we are interacting economically and trade-wise. We have studied, I've studied this proposal. I think it's a great proposal, and we have to look into how we can benefit from that. I think it's very, very interesting to see which kind of nations are involved in that. And as I said before, we are very, very keen to study whatever comes out of this kind of cooperation. And I'm pretty sure our companies are already studying that. Will that be beneficial and so forth? And you know, these are kind of negotiations or schemes. Hopefully they will be beneficial to all of us, and we think free trade is free, so it should not be limited or exclusive and so forth. Very interesting, inspiring proposal, and we took note of it, and I'm pretty sure that we'll look into that and see if it's of interest. But whatever can secure free trade and navigation, freedom of navigation and so forth is very important. And I think we all have learned the lesson that our global supply chains are, they can be put at risk if they are concentrated and located in one specific area. If this special area is hit by pandemic or typhoons and so forth, and it will have a very long-lasting negative impact on our trade. And I think we all have learned from that we have to look for diversity, and this is an example of diversity.
Thank you, Ambassador. My next question, I just was wondering if you could unpack a little bit or perhaps elaborate a little bit for our viewers and readers about India, Denmark. There are many synergies. You've talked about it, the Green Strategic Partnership, just adding to the already scores of MOUs that already exist with the two countries. But are there any particular subsectors that are first priority for both countries where, you know, perhaps that, and also if there is any synergy between India's self-reliance policy, Atmanirbhar Bharat, and working towards Danish principles and compatibility in there?
When we look into how to translate the joint statement on the Green Strategic Partnership, how to translate that into tangibles on ground, meaning new orders, new contracts, new jobs, new innovation, and so forth. And there are two specific areas that we at least would like to address in the first phase. And the first phase is a couple of months, 3, 4, 6 months down the road. That's energy and water. When it comes to energy, one thing that we are really keen on is to help India meeting its targets. India has launched a very ambitious target for renewable energy. And Denmark is, through our private companies like Vestas and others, we are extremely, let's say, competitive and innovative, and we have rolled out a wind industry which is second to none. It all started when this oil crisis hit Europe back in the beginning of the 1970s, and we redefined a little bit how to reduce our dependence on fossil fuel and so forth. And then the idea of using wind. Denmark is a flat country, and we have a long coastal line, which is just as long as the coastal line of India. So we started developing these wind turbines. And today is a double-digit US dollar billion industry with many thousands, hundreds of thousands of jobs across the world. And there we can do something, and we are pretty sure that we can help India, we can cooperate with India in that respect. When one of our big companies, Vestas, their CEO, met virtually with your Prime Minister earlier this week, and at that occasion, this Danish company announced important, continued and new investments in India, creating new jobs. But they also launched a new India-specific wind turbine, a turbine which will be catering for the special wind conditions in India. And I think it's great, because that wind turbine will be manufactured in India. That will create jobs, and it will create new opportunities, and it will also turn India into a manufacturing hub or world hub for onshore wind turbines. Another part of our green strategic partnership is a focus on offshore wind farms. India is slowly moving towards something, and hopefully we'll see the first tender coming out perhaps early next year. And there we have cutting edge, really top knowledge, insight, and proven track record. So there we can also do help India and assist India in meeting its very important, ambitious targets. Then you need to have a resilient, robust energy grid in place, a grid system that can really cater with this fluctuating electricity coming from renewables. Problem being, you can't store it. You can have a lot of solar panels. They can generate electricity. Wind turbines will also rotate and generate electricity. But how do you really store that? And I think we have to look into that. And if we can find better ways, new ways of storing this kind of energy, and it can be hydrogen, where we're also looking into that and now have started a huge consortium. So there might be some issues there and some opportunities. The same goes for EVs, and India is also with a huge automobile industry. They have to look into how can we cater for the new future, the new age, and why not use EVs as a kind of mobile batteries where you can charge when there's a surplus or peak hours of electricity generated from renewable sources. And that's why our Green Strategic Partnership is so important. It was Modi called it a new age partnership. So we are not just living in the present. We still have the past in our head, but we are really dreaming about the future, a green, sustainable future. Another topic would be water, and water is the only substance in the world that you can't substitute. You cannot, we have the water, and we cannot add or get more of water. The only thing we can do is take care of the water resources. And India, with the huge water scarcity, which you find here, but also you have areas where it was constantly overflooded. You have the monsoons and so forth. So what is called for here is a far better water management system, but you also need to improve how water is consumed, how it is being handled. In Denmark, non-revenue water being pumped into the system for drinking water, it's around 4 to 5%. In India, on average, is more than 50%. So if you have a scarcity, then of course you need to secure that water is being treated as a kind of very precious resource. And the Jal Jeevan mission, bringing tap water to all the rural households, a fantastic mission by your Prime Minister. But we also have to keep in mind that getting access to water should not lead to overspending of this resource. So raising the awareness, using smart meters and so forth, so that's an area where we think we can assist. And wastewater is also a big issue out here, and like many other places, how do you go about that? In Denmark, we have developed a kind of technology, so as sewage plants, they have turned into kind of energy producing plants. So when you are treating the sewage water, then in fact you get more and more energy out of it, so you can benefit from that as well. So there are many ways of cooperating, but energy and water will definitely be the main focus areas, and I think we can deliver very fast here.
Thank you, Ambassador. And this is my penultimate question to you. We've talked a lot about synergies. There's no denying there's a huge scope there for collaboration and investment cross-country. But are there any challenges? Are there any teething troubles between the two countries that might need to be looked into?
Yeah, but relationships will see ups and downs. We have had our important is really to look into the future, and the fact that India and Denmark agreed really on this green strategic partnership, a new age partnership, is showing that we have a great interest in developing a common platform, assisting each other in the future. And this year, in fact, we will be celebrating our 400 years anniversary of the first Dane coming to Tranquebar in today's Tamil Nadu. And when we came there, we were traders, and we signed a kind of treaty with the Nayak, the local king at that time. And we did not come to exploit or to create a huge empire. We came to trade. And I think coming back to your question about free trade and so forth, I think we have been very consistent in favoring free trade and trade, and that calls for collaboration. Another aspect which I think will have to guide us and will be guiding us is the mantra of your Prime Minister Modi. He said in his recent speech to the United Nations General Assembly, he said, reform, perform, and transform. And Modi, since he became the Prime Minister, he has really tried to initiate a lot of reforms. Also during the very tough COVID-19 times, a lot of reforms on agriculture, which I support wholeheartedly because it's great initiative. And then perform. It's not just to adopt a reform, you also have to perform, you have to execute on it. And the Jal Jeevan water mission is another great example. Swachh Bharat, which was announced on the ramparts in August 2014, outstanding. I was there myself. I felt that a new India was born here. Then, of course, transform. And I think we have to transform all our societies, but we also have to transform our own minds. And that's why I see, and where I see our Green Strategic Partnership is now really building a new, or giving a new recipe for sustainable, everlasting transformation. So reform, perform, and transform. That's what we are looking for. And I think by joining hands, India and Denmark have really decided to move into the future, and hopefully that will create another 400 years of good relationship.
Thank you, Ambassador. Actually, you kind of answered my last question within that question. So thank you so much for those wonderful insights and for this fantastic discussion. I'm certainly walking away with this with a better and greater perspective towards the Green Strategic Partnership. Certainly very exciting times indeed for India and Denmark. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your incredibly busy schedule for doing this interview with us. And thanks very much from London.
Thank you very much indeed. It was a great pleasure being there and telling about the most important milestone in Indo-Danish relationship. 400 years of baggage has now been turned into a recipe for the future, a green, sustainable future. So thank you very much indeed. And let's keep in touch. This is something big for India, for Denmark, and for the world. Thank you very much indeed.